Good afternoon. My name is Brian Masse, NDP candidate for Windsor West. This will be my 9th election as a New Democrat, almost 23 years in the House of Commons. I want to say welcome to Windsor, Ontario. Very happy to have the national press here as well as our local press, and for all of Canada to be seeing where we are in the front line of Canada, being close to the United States and connected to the United States at such a difficult time, but also at a time where historically we have stood our ground. I'm joined by James Stewart, Unifor President of 444, John Dagnolo, President of Unifor 200, Emile Nabout, Unifor 195, and as well Shinade Allder, Unifor Region, and also our candidate for London West, and of course our leader Jagmeet Singh for the NDP. I want to say thank you again for the leadership of the men and women of the auto industry, and just to remind that not only have they punched above their weight when it comes to quality, they have continued to support our community day in, day out, despite the anxiety of knowing or not what their future will bring. They donate record amounts of money to the United Way. They volunteer at our schools, at our places of sports, and all across the community to help fight poverty and other social issues. And they do so going up every single morning, building the best vehicles for our country and competing against the world. So with that, I want to say thank you again for what they do and what they're going through, and the Democrats have your back. And I'd ask Shinade to come up and introduce our leader. Thank you.
Brian. So as Brian mentioned, my name is Shinade Allder. I'm Unifor's Ontario Regional Council Chair, representing 170,000 workers across Ontario. And in addition to that, I'm also the NDP federal candidate for London West. So many of our members in Unifor, they are all auto workers and their related industries, and they will be directly affected by Trump's atrocious 25% tariffs on Canadian auto goods. Tens of thousands of fellow members of Unifor are going to face a very real household crisis of putting food on the table and gas in their cars. Parents will have to explain to their children why they can't play Timbits hockey or have dance lessons or go to family movie night at the theater. This reckless situation is being created wholly by one man, Donald Trump. This small and insecure man has decided to bully Canadians to give himself a tiny boost to his weak ego. But his bullying is not going to work. We have seen Canadians come together in recent weeks to oppose that man. And it didn't make us weaker. It made us stronger as a nation. But we need to keep that momentum going. This federal election is going down as one of the most consequential elections in our history. We need leadership in Canada that will stand for Canadian workers. Mark Carney has spent an entire career making money for millionaires and billionaires at Brookfield Capital. And even worse than that, Pierre Poilievre would sell us out not indirectly to billionaires, but in a straight cash deal to Americans. There is only one party fitting for us and fighting for us, and it's the NDP. And the only leader, and I will say that again, the only leader that is fighting for us is Jagmeet Singh. So it is my pleasure and my honor to welcome my friend, Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you so much, Shinade. I want to start off by talking about what it means to grow up in a border town. I grew up in Windsor, and living in a town like this, I think it's the only way you can really understand how connected we were growing up. People lived in the States and had family here in Canada. Folks lived in Canada and worked in the States. And our auto sector, it's what drove this city. It drives the city still. And I remember when the kids I played soccer with, their parents had good jobs at the union, and how that meant good union jobs at the factory, and how that meant that they were able to build a good life. And I remember when the turndowns and the slowdowns happened, and how that devastated those families and our community. And so we built up this relationship where we were good neighbors, as Canadians are, we're good neighbors. And to describe what has happened when Donald Trump stabbed us in the back, it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal, and Canadians are angry, but people in Windsor are pissed off. This feels like a betrayal, a gut punch, for absolutely no reason. Donald Trump has started an illegal trade war with Canada, one of their best allies, for absolutely no reason. And now workers are reeling. There's workers that are going into the work right now and wondering if their line pauses, will it shut down actually permanently? There's workers right now that are wondering, well, if I lose my job, how am I going to put food on the table for my family? How am I going to keep my home? Now, back in the day, maybe 20 years ago, if EI covered half your wage, you'd still be able to pay your bills, buy your groceries, pay your mortgage. But right now, I can say this with confidence, every worker is stretched so thin that cutting their salary in half salary compensation, means they're going to lose their home. They're not going to be able to afford to pay their bills. They're not going to be able to put food on the table. And so this is what we got to do. We got to fight back. We got to fight back and defend our country. Step number one is, if any business thinks they can take the manufacturing equipment in any factory here in Windsor or across this country, they think they can take any equipment out of it, they got another thing coming. Not a single piece of equipment should be taken out of any of our companies here in this country. We invested in that equipment. Canadians invested in that equipment. We're not going to let a single piece of equipment, a single piece of manufacturing equipment leave this country. Secondly, and we got to be very clear about this, while these tariffs are in place, no company should think they could sell here in Canada if they don't have a footprint here in Canada. So if they get rid of their footprint, they're not creating jobs here, they're not selling in our country. They're not selling in our market. We also have to make it very clear that as a nation, as a country, we're going to take care of our workers. So workers need to know that we're going to immediately put in place an EI that's going to cover their wages enough so they can keep their homes and pay their groceries and pay their bills. We got to make that happen. And to incentivize, you know what we need to do is we need to build Canadian, we need to buy Canadian, and we need to drive Canadian. So we got to retool our manufacturing sector so we can build vehicles entirely tailpipe to headlight in our country. To build up a more resilient automotive manufacturing sector, that's something we've got to do. We also got to encourage people to buy Canadian. So what we're proposing is that if you buy a Canadian vehicle, we'll waive the GST entirely on that vehicle to incentivize people to buy Canadian. And when we are purchasing vehicles at the federal level, thinking about the RCMP fleet, thinking about the Canada Post and the entire fleet, we need to be buying entirely Canadian-made vehicles with the federal money that we have when we purchase vehicles at the federal level. That's another way to incentivize buying Canadian, building Canadian, and driving Canadian. We're up against a serious fight. And as a kid that was born in Windsor, I call myself sometimes the little kid from Windsor. I was raised in this city, born in this beautiful country. I love this country, I love this place. We got to defend and we got to fight for it. And so for Windsor, a city that grew up, where I grew up, where people fought hard to build a good life for themselves, we got to fight back and defend this life. We got to defend our workers, we got to defend the people here, and that's what New Democrats are going to do. Donc, on a maintenant une crise énorme avec l'annonce de Donald Trump. C'est une attaque directement à nos travailleurs. Et je vais prendre un moment pour expliquer comment c'est une trahison. Le fait qu'on était des bons voisins, on a créé une économie ensemble. Et pour quelqu'un qui a grandi ici, sur une ville frontière, on connaît comment les deux nations étaient connectées. Je connais des gens qui habitent au Canada, travaillent aux États-Unis, les gens aux États-Unis qui ont des liens, des familles ici au Canada. On était des bons voisins. Et le fait que Donald Trump a attaqué notre pays, sans raison, c'est vraiment comme une trahison. Et c'est quelque chose qui frappe fort. Donc, on doit défendre notre pays. Donc, il y a quelque chose qu'on doit faire pour défendre les travailleurs. Premièrement, il y a des équipements dans les usines. On a investi dans cet équipement. On ne va pas laisser aucun équipement dans les usines au Canada passer les frontières. Si les entreprises pensent qu'ils peuvent prendre cet équipement de notre pays, non, c'est inacceptable. Vous ne pouvez pas faire ça. Deuxièmement, si vous voulez vendre des voitures au Canada, vous devez avoir des emplois ici au Canada pendant qu'on a des tarifs et cette guerre commerciale. On doit dire que si vous voulez vendre dans notre marché, vous devez avoir des emplois dans notre pays. Et pour les travailleurs et travailleuses qui ont peur à ce moment, qu'ils vont perdre leurs emplois, et ça veut dire qu'ils ne vont pas avoir la capacité, ils ne vont pas se permettre de payer les factures, d'acheter, de faire l'épicerie, de payer leur loyer ou de payer leur hypothèque. On doit avoir une assurance emploi qui les couvre. Donc, ce que j'annonce aujourd'hui, on doit avoir un plan d'urgence pour avoir une assurance emploi qui couvre ces travailleurs, qui leur donne la confiance qu'ils pourront se permettre de payer les factures, payer les loyers, payer les hypothèques. Donc aussi, pour encourager qu'on construise les produits canadiens, on achète les produits canadiens et on utilise les travailleurs canadiens. Aujourd'hui, on annonce aussi qu'un gouvernement néo-démocrate va enlever la TPS sur les voitures construites au Canada pour encourager les gens d'acheter les produits canadiens. On est dans un temps difficile, mais la seule façon qu'on peut se battre contre les États-Unis, c'est en défendant notre pays et défendant nos travailleurs. And finally, I just want to wrap up by saying, in this really difficult time, when people are really worried about the attacks on our country from the United States, we're going to have an election with different approaches to domestic policies, and that is healthy and that is normal. You know, we're in it for people, and we're going to make that case. But when it comes to the way we approach Donald Trump, we need to have a common, united voice. No matter what the makeup of Parliament is, we need to send a clear message, all political leaders, that together, all of us denounce the illegal attacks on our country. All of us together want Canada to win. We want this trade war to end. We want these tariffs to be lifted. We want Canadian workers to win. We want Canadian workers to continue to be able to work in their jobs, in their fields. And so my message is, when it comes to the way we approach Donald Trump, let's send a unified message that we are all united in fighting back against Donald Trump. We are all united in fighting back against these illegal tariffs. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We'll take now the press questions. One question, one follow-up. On va maintenant prendre les questions de la presse, une question et une question de suivi. Tell us your name and your media, please.
Hi. Hi, Dawson Chen, CBC Windsor. Jagmeet, you've bragged about your connection to Windsor. The future of Windsor's auto sector rests in electric vehicle manufacturing. What's in the NDP platform that isn't in other parties' platforms that will protect that sector?
Well, we talked about a number of things that would support Canadian workers right now. So first and foremost is we got to send a really clear message that all the investments we made in Canada, that we got to protect that equipment. We got to protect the investments we made. And so we got to send a clear message. No company should think that they can take any of the equipment that we've invested in out of this country. No company should think that they can take any of the manufacturing capacity in Canada out of this country. That's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. In addition, we want to encourage people to buy Canadian, and so that's why we talked about waiving the 15%, the GST, off of vehicles that are made in Canada to encourage people to buy Canadian. We need to also make it very clear that if you want to sell vehicles in our country while this trade war is going on, then you have to have a footprint in our country, so we want jobs in our country. We have met with workers before. We're going to continue to meet with workers, and we're going to continue to amplify their voice. We want to defend a vibrant manufacturing sector in Canada, and here in Ontario, and here in Windsor specifically. That means defending our automotive sector.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, good afternoon. Christy Kirkup with the Globe and Mail. How would the NDP's strategy for the auto sector be possible without bilateral deals with the United States?
Well, our first goal is to fight back against these tariffs. We want them removed. They're wrong. And we've got to fight back. We've got to fight back like hell to get these tariffs removed. Secondly, like I said, we've got to make it really clear that we're not going to let a company take any of the equipment that we invested in, all the manufacturing capacity that we invested in and supported and built here in Canada. None of that can leave this country. And if they want to sell in our country, then they got to make sure that there's a footprint here in our country. And so these are some of the policies that will help us fight back and defend our country, defend our sector. On doit défendre nos emplois ici au Canada. Donc, quelque façon on peut le faire, c'est ce qu'on a dit. On a investi massivement dans le secteur automobile et il y a des équipements dans les usines où on a investi dans cet équipement. On veut envoyer un message aujourd'hui que les entreprises ne peuvent pas enlever cet équipement, ils ne peuvent pas prendre cet équipement dehors de notre pays. Ce n'est pas acceptable, on ne va pas laisser les entreprises faire ça. Et aussi, si vous voulez vendre des voitures dans notre pays, vous devez avoir des emplois dans notre pays. Donc, on va demander ça. On va avoir des pénalties pour les entreprises qui pensent qu'elles veulent enlever les emplois et continuer de vendre dans notre marché. Non, on ne va pas laisser ça.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Singh, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. Vous êtes, oui, à Windsor aujourd'hui, mais vous avez changé votre horaire pour l'être. M. Carney a rencontré hier Unifor avant vous. Il y a des syndicats qui ont décidé de donner leur appui à des pans du programme des conservateurs. Vous dites que vous êtes le seul qui défend les intérêts des travailleurs, mais comment vous pouvez affirmer ça quand vous semblez être à la remorque des autres chefs?
Ce n'est pas du tout le cas. On était ici il y a un mois. Juste au moment qu'on a entendu les menaces de Donald Trump, on savait que ça peut impacter les travailleurs ici à Windsor. Donc, on n'a pas attendu une élection pour parler avec les travailleurs. En mois de février, on était ici, dans cette ville, pour parler avec les travailleurs, pour parler avec les présidents des syndicats, pour mieux comprendre leurs peurs, leurs inquiétudes et comment on peut riposter à la menace de Donald Trump. Ça, c'est pourquoi on a partagé notre plan où on parle de comment on protège les travailleurs impactés par les tarifs. C'est pourquoi on a demandé un changement d'assurance emploi pour protéger les travailleurs impactés par les tarifs. Donc, on n'a pas attendu une élection pour parler avec les travailleurs. On l'a déjà fait il y a un mois. Mais Mark Carney et les autres n'ont pas cette même sensibilité de savoir on est dans une crise et on a besoin d'entendre les travailleurs et livrer de l'aide aux travailleurs. Et on va continuer d'être la voix des travailleurs. On va continuer de défendre les travailleurs.
Merci. Next question.
We didn't wait for an election to meet with auto workers. We met with auto workers a month ago. As soon as we started hearing more and more threats of tariffs, we met with the workers impacted, potentially impacted, and heard from them and amplified their demands. The fact that workers are saying we need to have a plan in place if people are impacted. EI does not cover enough of their salary for them to keep their homes. We heard those concerns and we raised those concerns. We heard the concerns raised about making sure we've got a strong plan for a manufacturing and an industrial strategy for automotive sector here in Windsor and across Canada. We heard that and we announced that as well. So we didn't wait for an election. We met with these workers earlier and we're going to continue to meet with them and fight for them.
Next question.
Taria, Esri Global News. This question is actually for Mr. Masse, if you don't mind stepping up to the microphone.
Come on up.
Thank you. You're an incumbent in Windsor. I mean, you're out speaking to people here. How worried are you about just how potentially devastating these auto tariffs could be?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity because I worked in both Plant 3 and 6. Plant 3 doesn't exist anymore, Plant 6, the Windsor Assembly Plant. And I hear from it, we have Manny Cordoza here from 444, but also Windsor District Labor Council, where there is, a robust union element that has continued to provide benefits to the not-for-profit sector where I came from. I used to work for the Association for Persons with Physical Disabilities, and we relied upon donations from CAW then and now Unifor and so forth, and their members are volunteers that are important not only just in the money contribution, but coaching, making sure that mental health is strong in our community. And this uncertainty is very tough on them. We are often down on the waterfront every single day, either going for a stroll or trying to eventually go over and see relatives, friends, and family. They're all intertwined. And so when you knock on the doors, there's very much a passion in this community. We actually, at our cenotaph, we sing the Star-Spangled Banner because we had Canadians serve in the American military, We've had Americans serve with us as well in our history here. But you won't find any more fiercely Canadian people than here. Because we say it day in and day out, and there's a lot of attention on Trump right now, but we've witnessed the times in the past where, you know, we've been pushed around and bullied, but that's been part of what we've done is always stand back. So we're watching with interest to the rest of the country, hoping that there's solidarity for the people here. We've had to struggle through high unemployment rates, but we've also contributed a great amount of taxes, innovation, and breakthroughs socially for our country. And to see this right now, when we are on a peninsula down here, you have to remember that. When you look at a map, we're surrounded by the Great Lakes and we have the United States in front of us. But we're also fiercely proud to be part of this fight and have taken it upon ourselves to be a banner of pushing back against what's happening right now and pushing against the powers that be. I was recently in Washington, D.C., and I spoke at the congressional breakfast for the Great Lakes, and there was about 300 people there. And we cannot let one person tear down our environment, our economies, and decades of work to be a bright light for the world in many respects. So with that, there still is this hovering anxiety that people feel every single day. And lastly, that's why I started by thanking the workers here, because they produce the best vehicles of high quality, which has kept our auto industry going despite the years of not having government policies and support. It was the quality that came out of these plants that sold the vehicles that we still have today. And we need the rest of the country to help us right now, because this is going to be a long process, but we're in it for the long haul.
Thank you. Next question.
Good afternoon, Mr. Singh. David Thurton, CBC Radio. Just two quick questions. Should Mark Carney have spoken with the U.S. president by now? And secondly, are we here because of the U.S. president's announcement about the auto tariffs? Have you had to change things in your campaign?
Yeah, on the approach, you know, we're going to have differences around domestic policies, and I'll be very critical of the other leaders around their domestic policies. When it comes to our united front against fighting back against Donald Trump, I'm on Team Canada. When it comes to fighting back against Donald Trump and the negotiations, I want Canada to win. So I'm not going to be critical about the approach when it comes to fighting back against Donald Trump. I think we all need to be united on that front. Again, we'll have lots of disagreements around the way we do things in our own country, and I've been critical about Mark Carney on that respect, and I'll continue that. I'll continue that very vigorously. But again, with how we deal with Canada, or how Canada deals with the United States, we should all be united. And yeah, of course, with the announcement of the tariffs impacting the auto sector, I said we had to be here in Windsor. We had to be in the automotive capital of our country to talk to workers about the devastating impact of this. Like, to put it in perspective, there are hundreds and thousands of jobs at stake. And in Windsor and the Essex County and the surrounding region, there are a lot of jobs and a lot of workers who are now wondering what's going to happen. And the presidents behind me, these are the presidents that represent some of the hardest hit workers. And so hearing from them, hearing their concerns, hearing about some of their solutions was critical for me to be able to be here today. And so yes, we're absolutely here as a result of Donald Trump's announcement. We changed up our plan to be here to speak with these workers. Absolument. On a décidé après l'annonce de Donald Trump de visiter Windsor pour parler avec les travailleurs. Derrière moi, on a les présidents qui représentent les syndicats des travailleurs les plus impactés par les tarifs. Donc, à cause de l'annonce de Donald Trump, j'ai pensé qu'on doit être ici à Windsor pour parler avec les travailleurs, parler avec les présidents pour savoir leurs inquiétudes et comment on peut répondre pour défendre les travailleurs.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Mr. Singh, Rachel Aiello, CTV News. I'm wondering if you can pinpoint when in the evening last night you made the decision to pivot your campaign and come to Windsor. Was it before or after you heard from Trump? And just briefly, you had suggested there needs to be emergency measures. Is that something you've had any conversations with Mr. Carney about?
In terms of the decision, after the Trump announcement, we made a decision. I made a decision as a team that we needed to go to Windsor. We needed to focus on the impact of these tariffs. So that was when the decision was made. And then my team of course, my team agreed and put together today's tour. And the second part of your question was? Oh, right. I've not had any conversations with Mr. Carney about this. But again, when it comes to the way we deal with Donald Trump, I think we all need to be united. We all stand together to fight back retaliatory tariffs, defending Canadian jobs, Canadian workers. We all have to be united in the fight against Donald Trump. Donc, non, je n'ai pas eu des conversations avec Mark Carney. Et avec la réponse de Donald Trump, on doit être ensemble comme pays pour défendre notre pays contre les attaques de Donald Trump.
Last
Hi, Mr. Singh. Marina von Stackelberg from CBC National Television. I'm looking at the plan that you've released here today. There's 4 points. 2 of them I believe you've talked about before, which is improvements to the EI system, making it so that more workers can access it, as well as using dollars from the counter tariffs to help workers. If I'm correct, it looks like 2 of these measures are new, which is the asset stripping and the Buy Canadian, Build Canadian on vehicles that the Canadian Crown corporations use. So on the asset stripping, you're saying that companies who took public money won't be allowed to gut Canadian plants or ship out machinery and tools paid for by Canadians, and that the NDP will use every legal tool available. Can you explain how the NDP would do this? What sort of measures you would be able to take to prevent a company from, say, selling off something somewhere?
So we invested in this equipment in our country. We invested massively in the automotive sector. I don't want anyone in the automotive sector in the States to think that they can now just strip these factories of that equipment. We're going to use every tool possible, make it illegal to take this equipment out of our country. We're going to fight back. We've invested in it. We have an investment in it. We have an interest in it. And we're not going to let a company think that just because these tariffs are in place, that they can take this equipment out of our country, strip it out of our factories. It's not going to happen. On a un intérêt, on a investi massivement dans le secteur automobile, on a investi dans l'équipement pour produire les voitures au Canada. Donc, on a un intérêt dans cet équipement. Donc, ma message, c'est on ne laisse pas les entreprises prendre cet équipement de notre pays. On va arrêter ça et on va utiliser toutes les mesures possibles, toutes les lois possibles pour défendre les travailleurs et cet équipement.
Thank you very much. That concludes the press conference.
Thanks so
Merci
much.
beaucoup.
Merci.
Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. Bonne journée.
Merci, thank you.